Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. It's Russell with Ink and Paper Blog. How are you doing today? I hope you are doing very, very well. It is a lovely weekend in Northern California and the weather is fantastic. I do want to do a quick little shout out to James Morin 28 who won my giveaway. I haven't heard from you. So I'm going to give you till next Sunday, which is February 11th, to shoot me an email with your address and where you would like the 2 books that you won sent. If I don't hear from you by February 11th, I am going to pick a new winner so that I can get these books out to someone and ready to read. I am coming to you today with my January wrap-up. I know I told you guys at the start of the month that I was having a slow reading start, and I actually did, but then once it picked up pretty well. I'm pretty happy with what I got read because I read some bigger books for myself, so I'm super happy. So let's get started. The first book that I read was The Observations by Jane Harris. Now this was, of course, recommended to me by Simon Savage over at Savage Reads. He had just read Jane's newest novel, which I believe is called Sugar Money. And I had never read anything by her. He highly recommended picking up her first novel, which was nominated for the Orange Prize, which turned into the Bailey's Prize, which is now the Women's Prize, when it came out. This is the story of Bessie Buckley. It's set in 1863. She is a young woman who at the start of the novel is walking to try to find new work. She's headed from the country into the big city where she stumbles upon a house and a woman and winds up getting hired there by the lady of the house to be sort of the personal house servant. You find out through time that there have been a number of house servants and that the lady of the house is rather eccentric. There's interesting dynamics between her and her husband. And the title, The Observations, is, and you find out fairly quickly, is because the woman who runs the house is observing her servants and making observations regarding them. And it is fantastic. It's very Victorian in feel, very lush in language, very involving. Bessie Buckley is one of those characters you will never, ever forget. She is well-rounded. She's not always likable. She's really plucky. And I really just enjoyed her. As the story goes on, you start to learn about the history of the house, the history of the servants. You learn about Bessie's history, how she got to where she's at. So the twists and turns, there's like this ghost haunting aspect that is just fantastic. The book is a tad long. Towards the end, I was a little bit like, okay, it started to get a bit repetitive, but you never gave up on Bessie. You really wanted to know what was going to come for her, and it is fantastic. Highly recommend The Observations by Jane Harris. The next book, actually, that I'm going to talk about really deserves its own video, but I don't do one video reviews very often. But if I did, it would definitely be Red Clocks by Leni Zumas. I will link below Emily of Possibly Literate's spoil-free review down below because she did a one-on review and it is fantastic. And really, she'll say everything much better than I can. And I also got to meet Leni Zumas at Booksmith San Francisco when she did her book tour, and she is just amazing. Now, how to describe Red Clocks? This is the story of 5 women. 4 of them live in sort of present-day small-town Oregon, just north of Salem, and they all are within a community. The difference in this world is that Roe versus Wade has been overturned, and there's a new law on the books that's about to change who can adopt children and who can have children singularly. You have the 4 women in the book, and they are defined throughout the novel by sections where they are titled by their role in society. You have the biographer, who is the teacher and also is writing a biography of the 5th woman in the book, which I'll tell you in a minute. You have the daughter, who finds out fairly quickly at the book that she is pregnant. You have the mother, who has 2 children, and then you have the mender, who is sort of like I'll use the word medicine woman, but that's not the right term. She's sort of like the holistic healer that is helping the women in the community now that all of the laws have really changed. The biographer is writing a biography of the 5th woman, who is an 1800s Icelandic explorer who did a lot of work regarding ice, and it is intertwined within the story. What is fantastic is all of the women's sections are titled by sort of their role, and as you read each section, you notice that all of these characters know each other, so you learn about them through other perspectives. Now, the biographer is a single woman in her 40s who wants to have children, but because of the upcoming law, won't be able to adopt them unless she's matched quickly, and she's going through fertility treatments to try to have a baby of her own. The daughter finds out she's pregnant, does not want the baby, and has to deal with the fact that abortion is no longer legal. The mother is a mother of two with a husband that is not always invested in the family and struggles with what I'm not a mom, but I imagine that a lot of moms struggle with how much they love their children, but the frustrations of that being how you are defined. And she had a history, she had a world that in a role that she wanted, and having the children and getting married derailed that. And so there's sort of this, I love my children, sometimes I don't like my children, I love my husband, I sometimes don't like my husband. It's very dynamic and very powerful. The mender is intertwined in all of this because she helps with a lot of the stuff going on for women in the novel due to these changes. The brilliance of this book is stylistically it is different than much that you've read because it almost has sort of a free verse poetry section. It's broken up where you'll just get sort of these emotional punches, but the story moves so fluidly that it never gets in the way of what Leni Zumas is trying to say. I finished this book, and I was buddy reading it sort of impromptu with Emily over at Possibly Literate, and we could not stop talking about it, and I still think about it all the time. It is going to be in my top 10 books I've read this year because it is brilliant, it is topical, it is non-judgmental, but very powerful, and it will change the way you think about books. It is that good, you guys, so highly recommend The Red Clocks by Leni Zumas. The next book takes a totally different turn, and that is Jane Steele by Lyndsay Faye, which I read with my online book club, which I recommended because Joss over at Squibbles Reads says it's her favorite book. Jane is a young woman at the start of the novel who lives with her mother, her aunt, and her cousin. Her mother passes away, she becomes an orphan, and something occurs with her cousin and he dies. That happens very early, and she believes that she murdered him. So with that onset, she goes through life. She goes to a boarding school where she is put after the death of her cousin. There are major issues with the boarding school. And as she goes through each aspect of her life, she meets a man who is not good for women, and she takes care of them. That's all I'm going to say. You will never be sort of on board with the fact that she's a murderer, but you'll never blame her. She's like very morally ambiguous, and that ambiguity, God, I'm having a hard time with the word ambiguous and ambiguity, is what makes this book so good. I will say at the end of the novel, she goes back to her house because someone else has taken it over, and she believes that she is the rightful owner. The owner has come from India. He was involved in the Sikh Wars, sorry if I'm saying that wrong. He has brought people over with him that are his friends, and they sort of have this facade that they are the servants. And there's a lot of intrigue, and that becomes a big plot point. I found that part a little bit confusing. I didn't always understand how it flowed, but it's a page turner. You keep going because you want to figure out what happens, and the resolution is rewarding, and it is a fun, fantastic book. I posted on Twitter, I want HBO to turn this into the series. I want the girl, I'm blanking on the actress's name, who plays Arya Stark, to play Jane Steele, and I think it would be fantastic, and I think that it would be so good, and I really highly recommend this if you just want something to sort of get lost in. It has a Victorian feel, so you're definitely like turning pages and wanting to know how it ends. Jane Steele by Lyndsay Faye. I'm not going to say much about the next book because it was my book club for my 1,000 Pages Around the World book club. I will link the video where I talked about it below, and that's The Changeling by Lavalle. I hear he actually says his name is Victor Lavalle. I apologize, I've been saying it wrong this entire time. So I will link that video down below. I highly recommend this crazy book. It will definitely have a lot to talk about, and you will definitely, if you watch my video and read the comments, people have opinions. So that's The Changeling. The next book I read was Binti, The Night Masquerade by Nnedi Okorafor. This is the third book in the Binti novella trilogies. I can't say much about the plot because it is so intertwined in the first 2 books. But fantastic ending to a fantastic series, and if you haven't read them, pick them all 3 up. You will binge them. Binti is a strong, female, intelligent heroine that you will get behind. Her world building is fantastic. The science is fantastic. You will love these books, I promise. Binti, all 3 of them. The Night Masquerade was the 3rd, and it's so good. The next book I read, I don't even know really how to describe The Job of the Wasp by Colin Winnette. This was a horror novel, and it is creepy as heck. This is about a young boy who really is not named throughout the entire book, who at the start of the novel winds up at a home for young boys who are parentless. And he's sort of immediately intertwined into the mystery of this house. And people die, and he's trying to figure it out, and he's being blamed, and there's like a ghost story aspect and a murder aspect, and he is like the most unreliable narrator that I've ever read, because his opinion keeps on changing as he gets facts about the boys, about the headmaster, about the history, and it gets creepier and creepier, and I don't even know what to say, but at the end of the book, I was creeped out. And it is so worth reading. I will say I had a hard time placing this book in time because it has there's a scene where the fire alarm is set off and the sprinklers go and the school is flooded. But also at the start of the book, every student is given a knife to whittle his pencil to sharpen it. So in my head, I couldn't put those 2 things together to figure out what the time period was. But it didn't matter. You will be creeped out by this book. The cover is creepy. There is a Wasp section that is freaking crazy. And I highly recommend it if you just want something weird and creepy and crazy and involving, and it is very, very good. That is The Job of the Wasp by Colin Winnette. Thank you very much. Soft Skull Press, who published this, sent me this copy, and I highly, highly enjoyed it. And he is from the Bay Area, and I am planning to see him in person. Okay, 2 more books, guys. The next book I read was The Natural History of Dragons, a memoir by Lady Trent by Maria Brennan. And this is the first book in a series, also recommended to me by Joss over at Scribbled Reads. And this is just fun, sort of reality-based fantasy about a young girl who turns into a young woman who is fascinated by dragons and wants to study them. And this is told in a journal-type manner. So you start at the beginning, you get her growing up, becoming part of her family. She's sort of tomboyish, which frustrates her mom, which her father sort of allows and encourages. She's intelligent, she's smart, and she winds up marrying a man who they go off together on adventures to do the stuff that she loves to do. It is not a fast sort of turn the pages fantasy novel. This is very introspective. It is very almost academic in tone, but you will really like Lady Trent. And her name is Isabella, and you will like her. You will want to be on her side. It does get a bit slow towards the end. There's sort of this intrigue about they're on an island and there's a king and there's smugglers and all this kind of stuff, and the dragon aspect, which kind of bogs it down a little bit, but she carries the book. And if you've not noticed, I have read a lot of books with really strong female characters, and she definitely falls in that. I really love Lady Trent. I really enjoyed this first book. If you're just looking for something that has that touch of fantasy involved in it, but not overwhelming, but sort of set in a time period that has a Game of Thrones-y feel to it. This is a really, really great book. I will be picking up the next one, and that's The Natural History of Dragons, a memoir by Lady Trent by Marie Brennan. And last but not least, I read a graphic novel, and that is Blue is the Warmest Color by Julia Maroh, and I don't know who translated this. Hold on. Was it translated? I thought it was originally written in French. This is the English language edition. Oh, it was translated by Ivanka Hannenberger. So this is a graphic novel about a young girl and coming to terms with her sexuality. She goes out one day and she sees a girl, and it sort of just spawns all these feelings, and that woman and her develop a relationship. I don't want to say too much about it because every page is beautifully situated to move the story along. And the art is simple and pretty and beautiful, and it's really a great sort of coming out tale. And there's a bit of tragedy, there's a bit of just plain old love. I will say, trigger warning, don't give this to anyone or don't read this if you have any problems with visual sexualization of lesbian love. It is beautifully done, but I know that you may not want to give that to your 13 or 14-year-old. But if you are that person that doesn't have that issue, this book is definitely worth it. It's turned into a movie, which I really want to see. I just think this was so good, you guys, and it was really just, it just gave me all the feels. Does that say enough about it? And that is Bluest is the Warmest Color. Blue is the Warmest Color by Julia Maroh. So that was my reading month for the month of January. I read some good stuff. Please go out there. Have you read any of this? Let's talk about it. Please get the books that I'm raving about that you haven't read, because I really, really, really recommend everything in my pile today. As always, if you are a return subscriber, thank you so much. Love having you. If you're new to my channel, welcome. Please subscribe. I hope you like what you watched. Until next time, happy reading, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.